Welcome back to WNHH FM's Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines of the stories that make our community tick. And no one's been making our community tick, well, few people, more in the last few weeks than the unionized 31,000 workers of Stop and Shop supermarkets in New England, including many right here, who have put their livelihoods on the line to try to not, well, we'll hear today about what it was for, because, we all have our sense of what was going on. And we have here Jorge Cabrera, who is a leader of the Union of United Food and Commercial Workers in New England. And George, the strike ended on Monday after 11 days. I'm going to ask you to get this so close to that mic that you almost touched it.
Sure.
And there's a contract. Is it being voted on today?
Yes, tonight at the Omni Hotel at 7 o'clock, our membership will be gathering from Local 919, one of 5 locals.
And again, please get close to that mic if you may push it up.
One of 5 locals that's going to get together this evening.
In all of New England?
This is for Local 919. We represent about 7,000 workers, so we're part of a 5-local coalition.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just going to be voting tonight to ratify our contract.
And is there any doubt it's going to be ratified? I'm hearing there's really no doubt, right?
Well, we know our president has to go over more specifics to our membership, but we are recommending a vote of yes, and we feel pretty confident, given what was achieved at the bargaining table, that they will be voted in.
So now, what did we get? What did the workers get in this contract? Did they get raises? Did they get benefits preserved? What was at stake?
There was a lot at stake. This company came to the table proposing very draconian cuts to our healthcare plan for our members.
Cuts that would be more than the raises they would get, right?
Yes. Yeah, we wiped out by essentially the raises that they were proposing. Also, significant cuts to our pension. And they never wavered. We spent almost 3.5 months at the negotiating table until finally we really were faced with not having much of a choice, and we had to pull our members on strike.
Now, at first I thought you weren't going to be striking, because over the last few contracts, there would be a strike vote, but then there would be an agreement at the end. And one thing that was different this time is that there's a new owner, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So who used to own it and who owns it now?
It used to be owned by a company called Ahold, and it was now merged with another company called Delahaye, which is a Danish company. And they are a bigger company. They are majority non-union now. And we saw a very big change at the bargaining table in terms of attitude, in terms of the vibe that we were getting at the table. And
so this is the thing I couldn't understand. What was their end game? So obviously they were ready to go for a strike. The company was willing to hold out. They would say, we want you to take some cutbacks in health. We'll give you a raise. But they must have had some long-range gain to be willing to lose $2 million a week in sales. I mean, nobody was going into those stores, most of the places, except for their health insurance. What do you think? What was going on? Why were they willing to do it?
I think there's a couple of things going on, and I'm putting different bits of pieces together here. I think one is they got a massive tax cut from the Trump tax bill last year, almost $230 million.
Mm-hmm.
So they were flush with cash. The merger, resulted in large number of profits. They made $2 billion in profits last year. So
not just for Stop and Shop, though. They own a lot of other.
Yes, correct. So they were very profitable. I think they looked around the market and saw some of their competitors who are non-union offering much lower wages, much lower benefit packages. And the thing we kept hearing at the bargaining table was they wanted to be like their competitors. And
their competitors are mostly non-union, correct?
Yes.
So that's what my wife was saying. She's saying when they made the argument, well, you're making more than the others. She said that's what a union is, right?
That's right.
So what have the union if you're not going to make more than other people are getting paid?
Yeah, for us, it was the fundamental issue was...
And what we really want in society is for the non-union companies to have to match the wages of the union. Like that's one way.
Absolutely.
The New Haven Hospital for many years hasn't had its nurses unionized. And I think in part it's because they pay what you might get with a union, right?
Right. Yeah, so we our core values are our members have to have good health insurance, good pensions, be able to retire with dignity, decent wages, and so for us, it was a clear attack on the basic principles of why we have a union to begin with.
So, do you think they wanted to bust the union?
It sure looked that way. They could not make an economic argument for why they were making these draconian proposals. They simply could not.
Do you think they misjudged the public? Because it was striking, to use a turn of phrase. I was amazed because I was up in Massachusetts too. I just did not see people shopping. If one person shopped, that was a huge deal.
Absolutely. I think they did underestimate the public support.
Because that doesn't happen with labor in today's society. What was it about this strike
I
that
think
made people honor the line?
there's larger trends happening in our country. One is the radical economic inequality that we're experiencing right now in our country that is really putting the squeeze on lots of working and middle class families.
Hmm.
I think the Trump era, with some of the vitriol and the rhetoric that's going on in our country, and quite frankly, we also did not expect this level of support. It's not an easy call to bring your members out on strike. It is the last resort. And
Hmm.
one of the things we debated internally was, would the public be with us? Would they actually stay away from our stores? And overwhelmingly, the answer came back yes. And we were very pleasantly surprised about that. In fact, some reports show that foot traffic at Stop and Shop decreased by 75%.
I thought it was more.
No, that was the foot traffic. The sales in some of these stores went down 95%.
Because like in Whaley, were they even open except for the pharmacy?
Some stores did close for several days when they were just reacting to the first couple of days of strike, and they tried to reopen with limited schedules.
Hmm. Alfredo Ortiz writes in, thank you for joining us, Alfredo. Why has AFCW not been able to do anything for the workers at Seatown, Howard Foods, and Zane's Bicycles? They convinced the workers to unionize. They are paying dues, but not benefits for them.
Is the question for UFCW? Is that what he's?
Yeah.
I'm a little confused. Oh, well, we talk to workers all the time, and sometimes we have organizing drives. One of the things we hope to get out of this strike that was very successful is that other workers will be emboldened and see the value and the power when workers come together and try to form a
Well,
union.
do you represent those other workers?
No. What
So
did
I
he
don't know
mention?
what he's referring to. Are you
Seatown?
referring to Seatown, Howard
No.
Foods, and Zane's Bicycles?
No, we do not.
They convinced the workers to be unionized, so they're not paying dues. Or they're
No,
paying dues
those
to other
are members.
unions?
No, those are not members of our union.
Any union? Does he have it?
Not that I know of. Well, the UFCW there's two locals in Connecticut, Local 371 and Local 919. I can only speak to Local 919, which is my union.
Mhm.
We do not represent those businesses.
Okay. So now, one thing we heard, Jorge Cabrera, who helped lead the strike, you were really the face of the leadership of the strike for our local area, New Haven, Hamden, the Naugatuck Valley. We heard a lot in this strike about Marty. And we all had the same experience. Well before the strike, I met Marty at Stop and Shop, and my jaw dropped. And apparently everyone else felt the same way. And that's the robot who right now they're saying isn't any threat. Marty's just looking around, see if there's a spill, and call for help. But clearly everyone sees it as a new era of automation. Marty wasn't at the table, though. Right? There was no issue about Marty in the strike, was there, in the negotiation?
There were some conversations about automation. I can't go into specifics right now because our members have to vote on the contract tonight.
But there is something about automation that's going to be voted on tonight?
There's a part of it, yeah. Marty was hilarious. The timing couldn't have been better. They actually rolled Marty out very close to the negotiation before we went on strike.
So that wasn't smart on their part.
It was not smart. It was very expensive. The members that I represent complain about Marty a lot.
But is Marty still going to be here after the strike?
Yes, Marty will still be here. He's a nuisance, to be honest with you.
But for 3 years, will there be some limits on what Marty can do?
There may be. I'm really not at liberty to discuss the specifics at this point because we do have to roll the contract.
And as the workers told us outside the supermarkets, George, they are concerned about automation more broadly. Because most people now check out themselves, especially if they're younger than I am. Like my daughter can do it, but I'm too freaked out by the computers. And I actually like talking to the woman.
Yeah.
Like at Whaley, I always go to Helen Powell's.
Yes.
It's nice to have that human interaction. The world is changing with less human interaction. And I'm pretty convinced we're going to be doing a lot, or at least our younger generations will be doing almost all its shopping, if it's not online, with machines. And that's not going to be good for unions, right?
Yeah, what I
guess I'm asking, can you put the genie back in the bag of automation, or is this a matter of managing it?
I think we have to ask ourselves some fundamental questions. One is, do we really value work in this country? And are we going to pay workers a living wage and with decent health benefits, and they can retire with dignity? I think, at Stop and Shop, you saw how valuable those customer relationships are because almost to a person, customers stayed away from these stores and supported these workers precisely because they have relationships with our members, because they, in many ways, sometimes grow up with them. Many of them have seen their children grow up, and that's powerful. And that's the message we've been trying to give to Stop and Shop for many years is that the relationships our members build with your customers is what keeps your customers coming back. It's not necessarily the pricing of your goods or the quality of the product you're selling. It's the relationships that these customers build over time.
Do you think you've changed their mind, or the industry? I guess what I'm trying to get at is that I am skeptical that in 10 years we're not going to see a dramatic change to automation in supermarkets. Are you saying it's possible to hold that back, or is it just to minimize it?
I think it's minimizing it is important. I think managing, but I think also there's a question of how effective it is. I mean, I can tell you,
Yeah.
for instance, just to show, you brought up Marty. I cannot tell you how many of our members complain about Marty because what he does is he reports spills. It goes to the system, the audio system in the store, and lots of times it's a little piece of paper
Oh,
or a business card that someone dropped, and he reads that as a spill. So what it does is it takes our workers off their tasks to
yeah.
run to an aisle to see that it's something very simple that could have probably waited. So
Yeah.
it's not as efficient as people think
But
it
isn't
is.
that partly a question of just improving the technology over time? Like at first, self-driving cars are going to crash, but we're going to get to a point where they don't crash so much, right? At some point, Marty's going to know the difference between a bottle of salad dressing that breaks in aisle 7 and a business card, right?
I hope so. Yeah, but at the end of the day, we're in the business of making sure we represent our members
Uh-huh.
and they have, again, decent wages and benefits. That's important to us.
Well, it's definitely a noble fight. So, it was so interesting to be living in 2019 and to see a successful strike. And to
Yeah,
see people like my rabbi told everyone in synagogue, it's not kosher if you buy food for Passover there. I mean,
yeah,
that was so interesting to see that happen.
it
So what's
was
going to
amazing.
happen next? What's this going to mean for the labor movement?
I think the labor movement has been invigorated by the strike. You're
Hmm.
seeing it resonate across the country. This is part of a larger trend. You saw the teacher strikes the last couple of years across this
Right,
country.
right. That was in red states too.
In red states, many of them, the members actually getting ahead of their leaders and doing it on their own and coming out with big successes in salaries and benefits across the board. I think what's happening is the radical inequality that we're suffering in our country has really awakened the working class and the middle class, and we're seeing a lot more support for working men and women. And the fact is, the labor movement created the middle class in this country, and that's what we're fighting for.
The labor movement has also tried to figure out how to deal with changing times. I remember having a conversation about this with John Wilhelm 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when he was running the Yale unions, that he said that the labor movement had a key point when we had the National Railroad.
Hmm.
All of a sudden, instead of individual unions in individual places, they organized by industry
Hmm.
because industries could move the goods
Right.
across the country more easily. That's when you had craft unions
Mm-hmm.
and the rise, I believe, of the CIO and then the
Yes.
AFL-CIO.
When they merged,
Now
yeah.
you had the internet and global trade. And not only is more done on the web, more is done internationally. And industries are more international rather than national.
Mm-hmm.
Just like with the railroad, you have more national industries. Now you had more international. And that the tactics that the labor movement used in its second phase might need updating for the third phase. Is that true? Or did we just see an old fashioned strike done the old fashioned way and that's the way to move forward?
I think, just to give you an example, in our strike, we utilized social media quite a bit. We leveraged it.
That's what you did personally,
Yeah,
right?
we did.
You were managing the social media account according
Yeah.
to the article that Sam, and thanks for letting our reporter Sam Gerwood follow around with you.
Yeah, and our international union was also very supportive. They ran a very robust Twitter page overnight. They had almost 30,000 followers on
Wow.
their Facebook page.
Awesome.
Support Stop and Shop workers.
So tactically, the web it can be your tool and your friend.
Absolutely, I think social media and a lot of these new technologies we're seeing can actually be a tool for organizers to get their message out and organize more effectively.
So fast food workers, some of the unions and other retail and gig workers, unions have decided not to try to organize traditional union locals, but rather labor organizations that represent them across an industry. And for instance, try to press McDonald's to have to recognize franchises
Right.
as part of a company with uniform labor rules. Would that
Right.
be an example of how some tactics shift?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you're right. We're undergoing immense economic change and societal change, and so we have to adjust accordingly. But I would argue that at the core of it, the principles of labor still are the same,
Mm-hmm.
and that is, do we value work? Do we believe that if you work hard, you should be able to provide for your family, have decent health care, and be able to retire with dignity? Those core principles
Yeah.
never change.
And retirement's tough because the argument you always get about pensions is because ever since Ronald Reagan, the attack on the air traffic control workers, we've gone down to, I believe, 11% or something of our country is unionized now.
Yeah.
And that's mostly in public industry. So most people no longer get the old kind of pensions. They get
No way.
riskier 401ks, if anything.
Right.
And so that's put pressure back on unionized, like you just had in your negotiations, not to be able to have money to retire in dignity.
Right. Right.
How do we reverse that trend?
Well, we believe that workers should have pensions. 401ks, as you mentioned, are not as reliable as a defined benefit plan as a pension. So we believe that this is the core value we have to fight for. And the reality is, if we're going to value work in this country, we have to invest in workers and we have to invest in their retirement and in their health care. we believe it's a fight worth having. It's a fight labor has been having for a long time in this country. Right now, undergoing the vast economic change that we're experiencing right now, we believe that while things are changing, a lot of the core values we're fighting for are the same. And I think you saw that in this strike, because the public was overwhelmingly supportive of our members, and it's because they got it at a core visceral level. They understood that these workers are working every single day and that they should be able to be paid a living wage and be able to have health care for their families. And that's something that was inspiring for all of us. It was pleasantly surprising, but it's something that that fight continues.
Well, how much does the average stop shop worker make around here?
Oh gosh, there's a range. I don't want to be wrong. I said probably anywhere between 12 and 15 bucks, depending on
An hour.
when they were depending on when they were hired. Our contract has different tiers.
So 12.15 is not super high.
No way.
But higher than other supermarkets.
No.
And how many hours do they usually get?
It depends again on when you were hired. We have full timers and part timers. The vast majority of Stop and Shop is part timer. We have minimum of 15 hours in our contract, which is needs to be better. But
and at what point do you get health insurance?
You have to be there for, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, at least a year to get health insurance. But I have to check because it depends.
But how many hours a week?
How many hours a week do you have to work?
Like, can they just give you too few hours so you don't?
We've had that fight before with them. We have a minimum of 15 hours a week.
And do you get health insurance for 15?
We offer part-timers health insurance, which is a rare thing.
That is a rare thing. And Inner City Connecticut, thank you for listening. Says great conversation. Stephen Samala, and Stephen, I'm sorry if I am mispronouncing your last name, writes in to George Cabrera here from the United Food and Commercial Workers. How many spills are happening in each store that would justify Marty's cost? It's all about Marty. Only wants to talk about Marty. So
Marty was famous in this strike. There are many caricatures of him out there. I don't know how many spills he would have to have.
No. How many are there? Are there a lot? Would it justify the pay? He's wondering whether they're losing money on Marty. You said they're losing money when they divert someone who's doing an important job because a business card falls on the floor.
I would argue that we saw that at the ground.
And how often do people break salad bottles? And
I really don't know that. The company would know that better than I do. But it's I can tell you what I'm hearing on the ground is that it's annoying and it takes them off task.
All right. So George, you've been working. I guess you went to UConn. Grew up in Bridgeport.
I grew up in Bridgeport. I actually went to Quinnipiac University.
Quinnipiac.
Yeah.
And you started out working political. You worked for Moral Alliance, political jobs. You was the former Speaker of the State House. You worked in D.C. Then you worked in the labor movement. Why did you make that pivot? And why did you want a career in the labor movement?
I grew up in a house with a social activist. We lived in a two-family home in Bridgeport. My uncle was a social activist who got involved in all kinds of social justice fights. So I was a young boy watching him and accompanying him on rallies and events.
What was the youngest rally you remember?
Probably 13, 14 years old. Police brutality rallies, rent strikes in Bridgeport.
Rent strikes.
Municipal hiring. Yeah.
I don't remember the rent strikes in Bridgeport. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I was young, and so that kind of awakened me. And then when I got to college, I majored in political science, and when I got a job in the Speaker's house, my job was to meet with the labor lobbyists. So I got to know them all, and I had to brief the Speaker of the House on what law, what legislation they were interested in.
And she wasn't a particularly progressive legislator. You're sort of middle of the road, right?
Yeah, it's probably a fair assessment. Yeah. So I struck up friendships and conversations with a lot of the labor lobbyists, and decided that a career in the labor movement was what I wanted to do.
And Jason Chacon, again, I'm sorry if I got your name wrong. Woo Bridgeport writes in, of course, about Marty. Marty costs like $30,000 a piece. Jason asks, "Is that true?"
That's what we heard. Yeah, somewhere around $35,000.
And do the workers? I guess the workers make $30,000 if they work 40 hours.
Roughly, yes.
Do most of them work 40 hours?
No.
And Marty works more than 40, right? He's not represented by union.
Marty, no, he's not. He doesn't get tired. He doesn't ask for breaks. He's never hungry.
But he's keeping watch on those business cards that are falling. George, you also ran for state senate last year in Hamden. You live in Hamden?
I do.
And you ran against a popular state senator, George Logan, in one of the more interesting districts in Connecticut, where you have conservatives, liberals, rich, poor in the middle, black, white. You got Hamden, Ansonia, Woodbridge. You came close. As a matter of fact, you were at a breakfast for victory.
I was.
And then you found out they did a recount. You lost by 77.
Yes.
People in political life, some of the most important moments are when they've lost a tough race. What did you learn from that experience? And what was it like winning and then losing?
It was a roller coaster emotionally. It was, not the outcome that we wanted, of course. I learned a lot about myself, a lot about...
Like what?
A lot about stamina.
Uh-huh.
I also learned a lot about people. I think, at least in my district, people are, I think, fundamentally good regardless of their backgrounds. And I think when you take the time to talk to them and get to know them on a human level, you realize that we all want pretty much the same thing.
And it's interesting about Hamden too, because Hamden, if I'm not mistaken, has really become looking a lot more like New Haven. Not only who lives there, but politically. I think they in New Haven might have had the highest vote for Hillary Clinton, for instance, in the last presidential election, if I'm not mistaken.
You may be right
You've
about
elected
that.
some of the most progressive legislators
Mm-hmm.
at the Capitol, including Josh Elliott. That's new.
It is.
What made Hamden turn bluer?
Hamden's a big town. I've been there a long time. I went to college there, and my wife and I decided to stay there. And we love Hamden because it really is a very diverse community, not just racially and ethnically, but economically. There's working class parts of Hamden. There's more professional, white collar, upper middle class parts of Hamden.
It's a really interesting town.
It is, and we love that. And that's the town we wanted to raise our boys in. I think, the Hamden elected officials that we've elected recently have really brought a lot of the issues that I believe in and been fighting for a long time: paid family leave, Fight for 15, healthcare issues, early voting. And we've seen a real increase in progressive politics in Hamden.
Jason writes, George may have lost that race, but he keeps getting up and he keeps fighting for the working class. And Stephen writes, hashtag Cabrera 2020. Is that a real hashtag? You running again?
I'm
Do you
not
still
sure
want
yet.
elected office?
I'm sorry?
Do you still want to be in elected office?
I do. I think it's important to have progressive voices at the Capitol. I think Connecticut has a long way to go to really fight for working class and middle class families. And that's why I ran the first time, because a lot of the things that I've been fighting for in the labor movement weren't happening, and I felt that our current state senator wasn't representing our district well.
Alfredo gave us a link to a registered article about employees unionizing at Zane's. I'm sorry I can't open that right now, but I will look at that after, and others I recommend too. If you're watching on Facebook, just click on it. John Larico writes, artificial intelligence and other similar technology is the biggest threat to the labor movement. But what do I know? I'm just a crane operator. Could it be an opportunity, George? Could we have, originally in the dawn of the computer age, there were idealists, they're very pro-labor, who said the opportunity of technology can be that people don't become slaves to their jobs. Right now, a lot of people work two jobs, and long hours can't have time to raise their family. They're still trying hard getting by. What if technology enabled us, even through automation, to work fewer hours a week but still make a living wage? That's not how it's going. It's increasing income inequality. It's helping people run these companies make a lot more, and people in the service industry make less.
Right.
But is it unrealistic to recapture that original vision where technology is not the enemy of labor, but the tool for a more meaningful life?
Sure. Yeah, I think we're living that right now with the disruption that we're seeing with automation in the world economy. But I think that it's also important to make sure that we continue to fight for the core values that we believe in. And it can be. I think it has to be managed well. I think I'm really curious, interested in things like universal basic income.
Yep. Yeah.
Single payer healthcare. I think if we could find a way to have these larger policies writ large in the country, I think that that's a natural outgrowth of, and it makes us a more just society as well. So yeah, it can work hand in hand. But I think what's happening right now is the change is coming so fast.
Yeah.
That we're seeing a lot of disruption.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, a lot of pain. And so my work in the labor movement is to fight for workers and to make sure that as we undergo this change, that we're seen as partners, that we are seen as collaborators in this change, and not just a number on a spreadsheet that can just be easily moved to the side without any regard for the impact.
So Alfredo says that at Zane's, you were the agent organizer, that the workers lost their jobs, including Alfonso Fatima Rojas' husband, and that there's not a union there anymore?
No, there is not. No, there was.
So what happened at Zane's?
There was an election, and there were contract negotiations that broke down, and it resulted in charges.
When was that?
Oh gosh, I don't remember exactly.
That's the smallest shop, isn't it?
It is. I want to say 2015, if I'm not mistaken.
Interesting. So what's your takeaway from what happened at Zane's?
That was a tough one. We had contract negotiations that basically broke down. The owner there was just not willing to bargain in good faith at all.
And the NLRB, this was still the Obama era. So you had some recourse to NLRB?
We
National
did.
Labor Relations Board?
We filed multiple charges against the company for violating the workers' rights, and we actually ended up in securing pretty generous financial settlements with them, for them, I should say.
Okay.
But it's part and parcel of what's wrong with our labor laws is that sometimes you can win these elections, and if you have an employer that is willing to use every possible legal barrier not to negotiate in good faith, it's difficult.
Well, you just won a big one.
Yeah, we did.
31,000 workers, New England. How many in New Haven? Or your area, your 8?
My area is about 7,000 in Connecticut, and our sister local has another 7. It's about 14,000 members between our two locals in Connecticut. It was a huge victory. I want to take a moment to thank the public, because without the public support, without the rabbi's support, and all these other labor organizations and social justice groups, we would not have won this. And it really was a victory for the community.
All right. It's a good note to end. Jorge Cabrera from the United Food and Commercial Workers. Good luck tonight on the vote.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in to fill us in at WNHH. Thanks to the miracle man behind the controls at WNHH, Harry Droz. Thanks, people who sent in your questions and your reactions. Always love to hear from you during the show and have you be part of the action. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience, performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.